I call Eugenie Sage, 5-minute call.
E te manga te whare tēnā koe, tēnā koutoa te mema o te whare Paramata. Pleased to take a short call on the Building Pools Amendment Bill, and as my colleague Jan Logie noted, the Green Party will be supporting this to Select Committee. Mr Speaker, I couldn't believe it when I read in the Regulatory Impact Statement that in the 10 years between 1972 and 1982, 100 children had died in home pools. And it was obviously necessary to introduce the Act which this bill is replacing. And as the Regulatory Impact Statement also says, overall the Act is working well to reduce the risk of drowning. The number of children who have tragically drowned in pools in the 10 years from 2002 to 2012 was 30. That is obviously far too many, but is a substantial reduction on what it was before the legislation was introduced. So this bill, while the speakers and the Scott Simpson and the National Party talked about the current Act being frustrating and inconsistent and called the bill sensible and pragmatic, the key test is where the balance is drawn between the vital need to protect our young children from drowning and compliance costs. The Regulatory Impact Statement also says that compliance costs for councils are $3.5 million annually. Yes, we want effective legislation that is easy to administer, but protecting our children from the very real threat that home swimming pools provide is vitally important. And that's why the Green Party is supporting this bill to Select Committee, because we are very interested in the submissions from people like WaterSafe New Zealand, from swimming pool owners, from Plunket, from Starship and others about what the impact of some of these changes will be. Because with things like hot tubs and spa pools, certainly other jurisdictions overseas, they exempt spa pools from fencing if they've got child-resistant covers. And there was certainly strong support in the public submissions on the discussion documents for these to be exempt from fencing. But organisations like WaterSafe New Zealand want spa pools and hot tubs to be subject to monitoring by councils. And that's because when the council officers go out to do an inspection, they engage with the homeowner, they are able to remind them of the risk that these pools, these hot tubs can provide when the covers are off. So that's why we're supporting it to Select Committee, because I think there will be quite a number of submissions around this issue of hot tubs and spa pools and whether they should be subject to an inspection regime. Other parts of the bill, in terms of making it clear that the fencing requirements don't apply to things like stormwater hazards, where you've got swale drains to garden ponds, I think will be an improvement. In Rolleston, for example, where there's an effort to improve stormwater quality, so there are large swale ponds which are used to help filter stormwater. They are immediately adjacent to houses. The council was wondering whether they should be fenced. And so we'll be very interested in submissions from councils, presumably in support of the clarification of the law around these swale drains and garden ponds. But it is, Mr Speaker, a question of making sure that in the government's drive to reduce compliance costs for councils and swimming pool owners, that we are not undermining the very important and effective provisions in the current legislation which have significantly reduced the number of child drownings. And it's, I think, 92% of the children who have drowned in a pool have drowned at home or in the pool of someone to whom they've been invited to their place. And 65% of those drownings have occurred while their caregivers have been inside, and 80% of the drownings were of children who were 2 years old or less. So it's often a momentary lapse in supervision that those drownings have occurred, and there are important provisions in this bill in terms of where doors are located, whether they are to be self-closing and changes there, which we will look very closely at because they contribute at the moment to reducing drowning. So it's a balance, Mr Speaker, between compliance costs but overall ensuring the safety of our youngest citizens. Thank you.
Sir William